All right, welcome back. Absolutely no time taken off. I'm getting right into part two of my take, my philosophy, adaptation from high intensity training. So, off the back of our last video, which if you haven't seen, go check it out, which was all about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy versus myofibrillar hypertrophy. Coming off the back of that, I'm going to explain why the way that human beings try desperately to measure everything is actually, at least in terms of fitness, does a great deal to hinder us and actually keep us from progressing as much as we should. Because intensity is not something you can so easily put a number on. It's something you feel. So, I'm going to get into why I believe that reps and sets and adding tons of weight, all of these different things, it actually kind of takes away from what this is actually supposed to be about. So, I think the first point I'm going to go over is that, for one, rep ranges and sets tend to create a false sense of success and failure. And what I mean by that is, for example, let's say someone is perhaps strength training, and let's say they're trying to hit their weight within a rep range of 3 to 5. Okay, and accidentally don't put on enough weight and end up hitting 6 or 7 reps. Now, from their perspective, they now think in their mind that they did something wrong because they had a preconceived notion that they were supposed to fall within a certain range of numbers. You know, it can also go in the direction of, let's say someone likes sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and is aiming for 15 reps. Let's say they only got to 10. They're going to feel like they made a mistake and put on too much weight. But it creates a lot more sense of failure than it even does success. And the reason that that's an issue, the reason that it creating this artificial sense of failure is an issue, is because it completely detracts and takes away from the point of this. Especially if the goal is to get bigger and stronger. Like, one of the ways it creates a feeling of artificial success is, let's say you kind of sort of guessed right. Let's say you're aiming for, 150 pounds for a set of 10. And, you squeaked out the last one at 10. And now you got this artificial sense of success, even though you probably had like 1 or 2 still in reserve. And that was just for concentric failure. That doesn't even begin to account for isometric or negative failure. Right? So, tons of different examples of how reps and sets will actually cause us to get in our head and think too much of things numerically, mathematically. It turns this into a math equation instead of something you need to experience. This is an experience. Every time you go into the gym and put your muscles under maximal tension, it is an experience. This isn't fun and games, right? Every single time I get up there on that chin-up bar, every single time I do a dip, in my mind, I am looking at this as life or death. I'm hanging myself above a precarious situation that's going to kill me if I drop. Now, maybe some of you don't like being that extreme. I get it. But you need to understand that this isn't This isn't going through the motions of reps and sets. My other issue with reps is that it actually encourages tempos that are not entirely conducive to keeping your joints and connective tissues healthy in the long term. While joints to some degree can handle range of motion under load, doing it repeatedly over and over and over and over and over and over again your entire life is going to eventually wear down the joint. So the smaller rep ranges are ultimately going to be slower tempo. Just by default, they have to be. And higher rep ranges tend to be higher tempo, but that doesn't stop some people from like throwing super heavy weight on the bar and like literally just throwing the weight around with nothing more than momentum, not controlling it whatsoever. This is wrong. You know, you got people loading up weight that maybe perhaps they should only be doing. I'm beginning to not like the idea of even doing contraction movements at all. But let's just say hypothetically let's take bicep curls for example. Maybe they load on a weight that they, under strict control, can maybe do 6 or 7, but because of their tempo and their target in their mind is like maybe 15 reps, they start doing this number, right? They start speeding it up instead of slowing it down. What a lot of people don't understand is that the force that your muscle fibers generate to even make the joint and the connective tissues and everything move is going to transfer into your joints and connective tissues if you're not controlling it. That is incredibly bad for your joint health over time. Some of you young guns might not give a shit and think that you're invincible right now. I get that feeling. I remember what that's like. It wasn't too long ago I felt that way too. You have to understand this is also a game of trying to build a permanent structure that you're going to have for the rest of your life. And the only way you can do that is to remain injury free. Now, if you want to be the vast majority of men who, by the time they're 35, are complaining about shoulder issues and tennis elbow and my shoulder, I haven't been able to lift up more than this height for like 4 years and it's constantly hurting, I can't sleep. It's like, if you want to be one of those guys, then keep doing what you're doing. But I'm telling you right now, reps cause people to think in terms of like even having to do this at all. And that's ultimately not how muscle fibers work. Muscle fibers and the force that they generate from the bottom up in terms of lower threshold units first, and then the higher threshold units as the lower ones expire. That's how they work. They don't care about reps. They don't care about sets. All muscle fibers care about is the amount of force that they are being required to generate against resistance. That's all they care about. That's the only language muscles understand. In case you need me to say that again, muscles do not understand repetitions, sets, or really even weight. If I'm being complete, like external weight, your muscles don't understand these things. Your muscles only understand the resistance that it is being met with and the equal and opposite force that it must generate to match that resistance. This is why it is called resistance training. Reps and sets, if I'm being completely honest, it really deduces people into being Neanderthals who treat this less like resistance training and more so like movement training. This isn't movement training, it's resistance training. You're training against resistance. Guys, it's so frustrating. Now granted, I understand it, which makes it seem incredibly simple in my mind. But it wasn't too long ago I didn't entirely understand this either. It's something a lot of people struggle with understanding because their mind is so wrapped around what we've been taught our whole lives. It's easier to manipulate someone than to convince them they've been manipulated. Anyways, the fourth reason I don't like reps and sets is because, I mean, I've kind of sort of brushed on this, but it disconnects men from instinct. Instead of feeling the resistance, feeling failure, feeling the intensity and overcoming those things, because you're actually present in the moment and feeling it, embracing it, mastering it. It stops you from doing that and forces you to compartmentalize something that you're supposed to be feeling into a damn number. If you can't tell, this really, it frustrates me a great deal. That people probably aren't going to hear this. A lot of people are going to hear it, and they're probably going to argue against it, but it is what it is. Fifth reason I don't like this. I don't like reps or sets. You know, some people wisen up enough to realize that lighter weight and higher reps is not enough stimulus. It doesn't generate enough force to get them where they want in terms of their strength goals and everything and size goals. But instead of questioning what they need to do to up the intensity, they instead pull the crudest and harshest lever that you can pull, which is adding a ton of weight. And, you know, I believe wholeheartedly in Henneman's size principle. I believe that, you know, the lower threshold motor units, which, like, even to move my fingers here, these are low threshold fibers that are doing this, right? Like, these fibers are lazy. I refer to them as lazy bare minimum fibers. These are like that one guy or several people that we all know, right? We've all worked with them. The people who come in and do the absolute bare minimum, right? You know, no more than what's required of them. Don't work any more hours than what's required to survive in their personal life. Can't ask them to do nothing more than just what they're supposed to do. If you try, they just aren't going to do it. Right? That's what low threshold fibers are like. Another good example is they're like women who become single mothers for no other reason than to leech off the welfare system. Lazy, right? Lazy. Do the bare minimum. These are what our lower threshold units are like. And these people will pull this super crude lever of weight. And yes, in a sense, this does increase intensity, but only to the degree of exhausting the lower threshold lazy fibers first. Now imagine like the lazy workers that I compared this to. Imagine that the boss comes along on the floor and starts quite literally demanding more of them and starts threatening them that they're gonna lose their job and all this, that, and the other if they don't start getting to it. A lot of people like that will just fold and quit and go find another job. It's kind of what the low threshold fibers do. When you add weight, right, it decreases the degree to which the lower threshold fibers can even participate in that movement. Another good example is it's like an alcohol fermentation that has stalled at like 10% and you're dumping in a yeast that can only produce 6%. Yeast cannot survive in alcohol that is stronger than it. It will not eat the sugars and it will die. Same thing. Lower threshold units, lower threshold fibers cannot participate at incredibly high intensity thresholds for very long, if at all. They immediately start giving out. And then the higher threshold fibers have to come in and carry the rest of the load. Okay, so an increase in weight is always going to be a decrease in the amount of reps that you can do. But again, the problem with this, the reason that I called it such a harsh lever, is because you're adding a significant amount more weight than your joints and your connective tissues have ever had to handle before. Every time you do this, especially at the increments that some people jump, and I know this from experience. I used to do this kind of stupid stuff, right? Going into the gym and being like, man, that deadlift felt really good last time. I think I'll throw on an extra 25 pounds. It's like, dude, it sounds, when you're deadlifting like over 600 pounds, you know, a 25 pound increment sounds small in comparison. It's like, dude, that's a huge freaking jump. And people do this all the time. This is a normal thing in the fitness industry. It's a normal thing in the fitness world. Gotta put an end to it. Gotta put an end to it. Gotta put an end to heavy lifting. Unless, of course, you're doing it for sport. If you're trying to compete as a power lifter, by all means, do what you gotta do, right? But if that's not your goal, if you don't care to make a life out of it, please, guys, don't be power lifters. I promise you there's a better way to become strong without destroying your joints in the process. So, ultimately, to summarize all of this, reps, sets, and even pulling the lever of adding really heavy weight are all inadequate to being able to quantify what intensity actually is. In fact, it detracts from intensity and only muddies the water. It just confuses things. You need to start looking at training in such a way that, I think this is something either Bruce Lee or Jet Li said. I can't remember which one of them said it. I think it was Bruce Lee. He said that he didn't begin counting his reps until it began to hurt. Like, we didn't even have the sciences to really understand it back then. Even he understood it. He had unbelievable inner strength. Even though his genetics weren't that great and he wasn't that big, he was powerful, right? The amount of demonstrations of him showing just how powerful he was is insane. And that's how intensely he worked out. So the reason I don't like sets, I don't like reps, and I don't like adding extra weight is because it detracts from what intensity actually is, which is getting your muscles to the point that the lower threshold fibers are toast and they're done in one movement. Ideally, it's a movement that you contract once. You get it in that fixed position for some exercises anyways. For some, you don't want to completely lock out. But like the chin up, for example, that's one that once you get up in the contracted position, hold it as long as you possibly can. You'd be surprised at just how quickly those lower threshold fibers give out, even though you're not even moving. Very quickly, you will discover, just how much more control even you will gain from doing it this way, by slowing things down, by actually focusing on controlling the weight while you are failing. That's where the true strength increases come from. Forces major adaptations to the myofibrils. Okay, so I think the only numeric system that you can accurately tie to intensity is time. It's the only form of measurement that works, guys, is time. And honestly, it makes it really easy to record your progression, especially if it's just with body weight, Like last time, you can look, like last time off, I held the chin-up position for roughly 45 seconds before the lower threshold units gave out. And then I lapped it and started a second timer, which recorded that I continued into isometric failure and then negative failure for another 30 seconds. This time, I held my chin up for 50 seconds and got into the negatives an extra 5 seconds, right? Easy, obvious progression. It's much more easy than having to constantly quantify, like, oh crap, I'm going up 10 pounds. Does that mean I should, like, maybe decrease in, like, 2 reps? Is that what I should be expecting? It's like it becomes this giant equation it doesn't even need to be. It's nonsense. It doesn't need to be that complicated. I'm going to do my best with this channel to try and simplify things again. Some of this stuff sounds really complicated, but ultimately it's to simplify things, guys. It's just time. You don't need to memorize reps. You don't need to memorize sets. You don't need to memorize weight. Just time. And honestly, if you ever do add weight, holy smokes, is that easy to keep track of. Really true, you don't even really have to keep track of it, you know? You just throw like a 10-pound plate on your back and watch as your time under maximal load, your time under maximal tension dramatically decrease back down again. Now you're having to build it back up. Still easy to track. You still just track the time. How hard is it to remember that last time you did it, you only had 10 pounds on you? But ultimately, the weight doesn't have to be that dramatic of an increase. If you ever even add on weight, I don't think most people really need to add on weight. Unless, of course, you intend to be hanging from the side of a cliff with someone hanging on to you for dear life, then sure, maybe you should start adding on a little bit of weight while you do chin-ups, okay? Maybe there is some real-world application for some of these things, adding some additional weight. But by and large, I don't think most exercises need additional weight. You obviously need to add a little bit of additional weight for your legs. They're used to carrying you around all day, so squatting down with them is a nothing burger. So in that case, you know, maybe adding a little bit of weight, even at the beginning, makes sense. But yeah, anyways, come back for the next video for part 3, where I will explain why, through limiting and simplifying this to time, we can reach new degrees of failure that we did not realize that we were capable of before. And hear me discuss my theories on if we can even reach true failure or not. Something I've been kind of mulling over recently. But come back next time. Leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below. Thanks for stopping by.